sweat and tears. The pressure's on, I can't go wrong. I worked so hard just to get here. Don't look down, you'll hit the ground. This vertigo's got me, my dear. Oh, how the mighty fall. Sky's the limit after all. Oh, how the mighty fall. Sky's the limit after all. Oh, how the mighty fall. Sky's the limit.
to tell me you're sorry. I've heard it 1,000 times. You always tell me you change now, back from the outside to turn back the hourglass. Why can't you be honest? Changing your mind, wasting my time. Love ain't just a promise. Over your kind, losing my mind. Why can't you be honest? Changing your mind, wasting my time. Love ain't just a promise. Over your kind, losing my mind. You keep on calling my cell phone to tell me you're sorry. I've heard it 1,000 times. You always tell me you change now, back from the outside to turn back the hourglass. Why can't you be honest? Changing your mind, wasting my time. Love ain't just a promise. Over your kind, losing my mind.
Thought I drew a line from LA to San Francisco. 6 feet deep reminds me where I don't go. But here I stand, remembering where my heart broke. So maybe I'll find the pieces here in Sacramento. Every corner of this town is a rabbit hole I can't help but go down. I can't help but go down, down, down. No over now, but I'm looking for the shards in my heart. Tired of falling apart. You know I'd rather be anywhere else than at your house in the pouring rain. Don't need an explanation, don't need an invitation. Just give me back my broken heart. Just give me back my broken parts. Just give me back my broken parts. Following the map from Auburn to the cathedral, picking up the pieces, lost memories in time. But there's one part left, just one more step and I'll be home. Just gotta get Every corner of this town is a rabbit hole I can't help but go down. I can't help but go down, down, down. No one over now, but I'm looking for the shot in my heart. So tired of falling apart. You know I'd rather be anywhere else than at your house in the pouring rain. Don't need an explanation, don't need an invitation. Just give me back my broken heart. Just give me back my broken heart. Just give me back my broken heart. Seeing monsters at your window. No, you can't sleep. You pretend though. You don't have to play the hero. 'Cause I got you like you got me. When the earth shakes, when the bombs scream, until our last breath, every heartbeat. You know I'll come running. If you go to war, then I'm going with you. Pick up my sword, yeah, there's nothing I won't do. When you tell me you learn, when the chaos is rising, leading the charge, yeah, I'm coming out fighting. Swear on the breath that I breathe, I'll never retreat, yeah, I'll be your army. When your nightmares turn to real life and the ground's filled up with landmines, we will face it standing side by side. You know I'll come running when you need. I'm coming. You know I'll come running.
Good afternoon. Welcome to our second community conversation hosted by the Provincetown Theater. I'm David Wilson. I'm president of the theater board, and I'm pleased to be your moderator today. I'd like to introduce our panel in alphabetical order. Robin Craver, our town manager. Polly Haley, actor, community organizer. Peter Johnston, AIDS Support Group of Cape Cod, and Don Walsh, Fine Arts Work Center. Today we plan to focus on family and friends, especially as we all navigate these very difficult waters during the COVID pandemic. With that backdrop, I'd like to start with our town manager, Robin Craver. And Robin, this must be your day, because we've had two big announcements today. The governor has extended the stay-at-home advisory from May 4th to May 18th. And our select board has announced that masks are mandated in Provincetown. So Robin, I'd just like you to respond to those two big announcements today, but more importantly, how do you think the community has responded to the stay-at-home? How do you think the community is doing? And how do you think we're going to do with maybe another 3 weeks ahead of us? So the floor is yours.
Well, thank you. And I appreciate the opportunity to come in and visit with you and join you on Community Talk. Uh, as you know, I'm in my 4th month here, so it's been new. So I've had an orientation to getting to know Provincetown, and certainly with the issues that we have now, they're unprecedented. And as I watch the community, I actually feel pretty blessed to be a part of this struggle as we try to find our identity and who we are in the face of such adversity. I've seen the greatest levels of compassion, and certainly there's a sense with people here that you are ferocious with protecting Provincetown. And I think we saw a little bit of that last night. There were a lot of people advocating for the mask sign, masks down in the buildings to make sure that they were safe, as well as trying to keep their neighbors safe. And I've seen the compassion with the groups that have been paying attention to the vulnerable population right now. It's just been really amazing. So regarding the governor's extension, we certainly were waiting with bated breath to see what he was going to do next. And I think now we are in, I'm sure you've heard, we're in a planning stage where what we're doing is working. We have 24 cases that have recovered. We have 2 cases that are still being watched, active cases, and we did have 1 death. And, you know, say something for the family and friends of John Throne. But the compassion level that's been there, and I want to go back to the governor's extension. I think that people who have been working to abide by the advisory to stay at home, there's a lot of issues and things that we can talk about in that. So I'm going to stop there and let you go on, and perhaps we may come back to a little more of that.
Thanks, Robin. I'd like to ask you, Peter, your organization, the AIDS Support Group, provides direct services. So you have a chance to actually see clients on a pretty regular basis. And so could you help us understand how your clients are coping with this stay-at-home and COVID pandemic?
Yeah, absolutely. So one thing that agency is very nimble, and we were very quickly able to make sure that our services could be as remote as possible. So we're answering all our landlines remotely, so employees are equally safe. And what we're trying to do is just communicate as much as possible, let people know that we are still here, we are still open. Give us a call, we can speak to you, and we triage on a very individual basis. So our medical case management services across the Cape are still very robust. Our food program has only been increasingly more important to folks. Just yesterday, I helped some other medical case managers deliver about 50 lunches across P-Town and Truro. And yes, for a lot of our participants or clients, for a lot of them, they're marginalized people. So some, we are the ones that are going to hug them. And for some, we're the only people that are able to hug them. And so it's tricky on both our employees and also our participants and clients when this is now not a time that we are able to hug them, but we can provide emotional support and assurance that we're here, we're not going anywhere, we're extremely stable, and we can help with whatever we have the capacity to do.
Thanks, Peter. I'm going to come back to you about those hugs because we're finding virtual hugs sometimes work and sometimes they don't. So I am going to come back to you. But Dawn, I wanted to chat with you a little bit. You, like the theater, provide a home for many people who no longer can come to our home because we're closed. So talk to us about how the Finance Work Center is reaching out to all the people that believe in you, have come to you, spend time with you. How is that working for them now?
Well, the fellowship program officially ends at the end of this month. But given the situation here, our executive director, Richard McMillan, has been working very closely on one-on-one with each fellow to make sure they have a safe exit plan to get to their next home. In some cases, we have we'll provide opportunities for them to stay longer if they need to, if it's not safe for them to leave right now. So that is being dealt with on a case-by-case, person-by-person basis to make sure everyone stays safe. Yeah. Yep.
Thanks, Dawn. Polly, you had said you were not going to wear a hat, and then you wore a hat, but I know you wear many hats. So I don't know which hat to call on for you, but you're both an actor and community organizer. You love animals because you're a dog walker. So you pick whatever hat you want to speak to, but I'd like you to talk a little bit about the people that you run into on a day-to-day basis and how you think they're coping with COVID-19.
Well, it's tough because we don't see people anymore. One thing that everybody loves about Provincetown is, just going out, just leave your house, go downtown, and you're going to see everyone going to the grocery market. You see half the town in there. But now everybody's hiding, which is, how they're staying safe. So what I'm not hearing is a lot of complaining about that, and a lot of my friends are bartenders, waiters, cooks, store clerks who have all been out of work for a month and a half already. Well, some of them were already out of work just because of the winter. And but they, for the most part, as far as I know, agree with all of the stay-at-home orders, agree that this is what we have to do. And I will say one thing, I thank goodness that I live in Massachusetts, because things could be a lot worse. They are a lot worse in other places. I mean, as bad as the health crisis is in this state, I feel at least that our government has our best interest at heart, or is trying to, so that's a good thing. And another thing I'd like to touch on is what I have loved to see is that people have taken whatever talents or whatever they can do and sort of turned it into trying to help people. For instance, I have a cousin who likes to make sort of homemade health and beauty aids and stuff like that. She works in a grocery store out in California, so she still has to work. And she noticed that all of her coworkers, because they're washing their hands so many times during the day, were all complaining that their hands were dry and cracked. So she went home and whipped up a batch of her homemade moisturizer, put them all in little individual single serve jars. And imagine if that was you and your coworker came and gave you that little jar. That would make you feel really good. And that's the things that people can do, just the little things, and figure out a way that you can turn your little talents into something that will help everyone get through this.
Thanks, Paul. You've actually opened up the next set of questions for me, and that is, and this is an open question for all four of you, as you think about how people are coping and how they're figuring out how to keep busy, what kinds of examples, or where have you seen, or have you maybe figured out a way to sort of move to the next step? What have you done or seen done to make things better for people that we know or people that lives are touched by? And I'll ask you, Dawn, to maybe jump in, because I know you've done some work around building a different kind of home. Maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
Oh, sure. Thank you. Yeah, so it's interesting to hear the question. What are we doing to keep busy? Like on a personal level, I think that this COVID-19, well, on a worldwide level, right? It's a stark reminder to all of us about the fragility of life, right? It is asking us to look very deeply at notions of impermanence, and it's really forcing us in a huge way to contemplate our shared mortality. And those are no small feats, right, being asked of us. And and in a culture that is, already death phobic, this crisis is really, I think, intensifying our collective fears of disease and death and dying. And so, in some ways, I think there is this silver lining opportunity here for those of us, who are safe and healthy and have the conditions to actually not be busy, to stop and contemplate, and think very deeply about these ideas of life and death, and to then bringing the community piece in to actually share with each other our fears about death or dying, or maybe our curiosity about death and dying, whatever our feelings are, our experiences. Because I know one of the things that's happening for many of us, including myself, I have in my history quite a traumatic, sudden death experience that was my mom. And so now in this world where the world is a dangerous place, right? And death is traumatic and sudden. It can trigger a lot of past loss for some of us. And to be able to stop and be with those feelings and to share them with each other. And I've had a lot of really deep, conversations with my friends, and this opportunity affords us that if we want to stop and go there, to dive deep into mortality and impermanence and loss and grief, and be there with each other to support each other.
Dawn, I think you're sharing things that we are all experiencing but don't always talk about.
Mm-hmm.
So you're actually putting it in front of us and forcing us to think about it. I don't know how many of us can talk about it today, but we can certainly think about it going forward. So thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Peter, I know you're facing similar situations with people that are marginalized. Maybe you can talk a little bit about any experiences you have with the same subject matter that Dawn just introduced.
Yeah, so I mean, firstly, we just try to be available to everyone, and it's mostly going to be through the phone, but also we're doing a lot of delivering of food, Narcans, syringes and supplies, things, tents and Hyannis, things that will assist people to just live, and Band-Aids, just get them to continue with us, and so that's super helpful, and it's to be able to have those communications and relationships that have existed for years and years and years prior to me even being a part of this agency, and just being vulnerable with our participants and clients as well. I've learned something about myself where it's okay to not always have an answer. It's okay to recognize that you can't always give an answer, and that's not always what's needed or asked of you. That it's okay to have a conversation with someone, or I can jump on Zoom and speak to a participant or client, and just look at them and just say, and mutually just say, I'm not sure. I'm not sure. We still have each other, and we're not going anywhere. And we're strong, and we're very, very fortunate to live in such an incredible community, where people have either their families or their chosen families, which to me has just become so much more evident here, where, especially in P-Town, people surround themselves by their chosen family. And those bonds are extremely strong. So again, recognizing how fortunate we are, and that it's okay to rely on one another.
Thank you, Peter. Maybe Robin, you can help with some of the town services that are available, especially as we talk about people needing to reach out, maybe needing services, maybe people that are in need. Certainly the mental health piece is a big part of where we are right now. So, Robin, maybe you could speak to that.
Yes. When this first started, we did a lot of planning and trying to figure out first how to keep our employees safe. And there was an opportunity, and I go back to something Dawn said about, when you start to face significant change in your routine, it makes you start to rethink priorities and what's important. And as I got here, staff worked well together, and I started to learn about people and what their jobs were and who they were. And then the virus and pandemic started, and we had to all change the way we knew how to work together. We needed to put everyone together in the room and start planning on how we were leaving town hall and how we were getting out of our comfort zones and supporting each other. And I found that, I've spent 20 years in public service. I've worked with a lot of staffs. And what I found with this group was that there was an opportunity and they took it. And the opportunity was to really see themselves as a part of a group that was trying to work for the community, protect the community, meet its needs. At the same time, these are people who have concerns about their own families and making sure that they're safe at the same time, and putting themselves at risk quite often. It's been an amazing piece to watch. I've watched the Council on Aging director make sure that they're making calls to 160 seniors a week. I've watched groups come together, such as the AIDS support group, and Dawn is a part of a group that we have going that are really looking at the vulnerable population and making sure nobody falls through the cracks. And we have a public safety group that's been operating and working throughout since February to make sure that we have the ability to transport people and making sure that they're safe. And I think that and I guess I'm thinking about this because we started having daily staff meetings every morning, and they really worked hard to try and find solutions. They didn't want anyone left out. They wanted to make sure there was enough support. They also, on top of that, continued to do their jobs. So we are up and running full with all the town services that people have enjoyed and still expect from us. So I really appreciate the opportunities that, well, not that we would welcome or want this to come back, but certainly there are some pearls if you look for them.
Thanks, Robin. And you've introduced the town family. Peter introduced the chosen family. And obviously, Dawn, you started with sort of the sense that family needs to talk about dying and living, or living and dying, however you want to say it. So clearly that was our theme today, which is family. And Polly, I wanted you to talk about the GoFundMe work that you did and how that's going to support so many families in town.
Well, thank you. The campaign is actually over, but the very day that the governor closed the state, basically restaurants and all, which was March 16th, I was, like everyone sitting around going, okay, is there something I can do here? And I had done some GoFundMes for family members that needed money for funerals and whatever. I had a little bit of experience with that before. So that very day just created a GoFundMe account mostly for restaurant and bar people, but pretty much any, hourly employee that had been affected by the crisis, which is easy to do. If you can sit there and you can set up a GoFundMe thing in a half an hour. You need to write a little description, find a picture to post, and then try to get the word out, which, Facebook, we were talking earlier about that sort of thing. It's great these days. And of course, within a week, it had raised $10,000. And by the time, the thing about GoFundMe's is they sort of have a lifespan. They don't go on forever and ever. So by the time things had sort of petered out by the end, which was 3 weeks or so, we had raised just about $15,000. And it was real simple. I collected the money. I had an email account where people just sent me a request, told me pretty much how much they needed. I didn't ask questions. I assumed this is where, you have to have a little faith in humanity. So people said, oh, I work at such and such a place. I could use $300 for groceries. And I sent them a check. And that, is the most basic way of people helping people. I was only a conduit. I don't really want to take a lot of credit for that. It's wicked easy to do that kind of thing. But what, really, and something I love about Provincetown and this whole community is how people were just, and it's not the rich people that do this. It's the other regular Joes, the, hourly employees, people who don't have a lot of money themselves, but will pitch in $50, $100, $20, whatever it takes. And it really, really makes a difference. And it not only benefits the community, but to the person who's helping, me in that case, who created the fund, and probably anyone who contributed, it really helps to deal with all of the negative and all of the stress and the uncertainty, to actually do something positive within it to try to help. It helps you deal with it as well. So I didn't make any money off of that account, but I benefited because I felt empowered, and I felt like, okay, I'm doing my bit to punch coronavirus in the face and to help my friends who need to eat, that sort of thing. So that was a great experience. And if anyone who contributed is watching, I'd just say thank you for that.
Thanks, Polly, very much. Dawn, I was going to ask you to talk a little bit about the Lily House.
Oh, sure. Thank you. Yeah, the Lily House is, I'm one of the 3 co-founders and the current board president, and we're a brand new 501c3 nonprofit organization that will be a community home for living and dying. So the majority of us, when asked, want to die at home, 80% of us. Only 20% of us actually do. And often it's just because we don't have the resources, whether it's people, human resource, or financial resource, to stay in our own home. So if that's not the case, then folks usually, need to go to a facility of some sort. And so the Lily House will be a community home. So it will be a maximum of 3 terminally ill residents at a time living at the Lily House. And with 24/7 round the clock hospice level continuum of care that will allow each other to die with dignity and comfort and grace in a home versus in a facility, being cared for, by end-of-life professionals and very much supported by the community. And as a nonprofit, this vision is really grassroots. It's by the community, for the community. And I think, Polly, thank you so much for, that story that you told and that work that you've done, because I think that it so exemplifies one of the huge strengths of Provincetown is that we are a community that really takes care of each other in life. In times of crisis and times of ease, we're there for each other. And the Lily House really exists to give us as a community the opportunity to take care of each other in death, to show up for each other in death, to honor each other's lives through the best quality experience of death that we can have, to bear witness to that, to love each other, to support each other, to not shy away or look away, but to really show up for each other in death. And That's the Lily House, and so we're looking for property. If anyone knows of any property, please contact us at thelilyhouse.org. And part of our vision also is community death education and programming to help us get the education and the information that we need to make informed choices about our end of life experiences, to allow us to develop a relationship with death and dying. So we're maybe not quite so afraid, although it's okay to be afraid because it's the great mystery. But it's quite vast in vision, and I'm very, very, very excited about it. And I just want to also speak, to what Polly and Robin were just talking about with, these this collective community work that we're doing in this crisis. And I feel like, it's important just to extend love to all of the people around the world who are grieving for the loss of a loved one who has died. Which is nearing 250,000 people as we speak worldwide.
Mhm.
And at the same time, those losses, of course, are very real. And at the same time, I feel like there's a way, Polly, you're funny, it's like that was your way of punching COVID in the face. There's a way that we as a community really, render COVID powerless in our desire and our collective impulse to help each other in times of crisis, to join together in coalition and partnership and show up for each other now. And there's no other place I'd rather be right now than Provincetown. I'm so fortunate to be here with all of you. And the fact that the Provincetown Theater is doing these community conversations just speaks to everything that we're talking about here. It's such a gift to be alive in this town with each and every one of you.
Thanks, Dawn. I think you've sort of put us in the direction of, so what should we be thinking about on the other side of this? Whenever this is over, let's say it's May 18th, share some thoughts about what you think either your organizations or you personally would like to do when we get to the other side of this, and how might we continue to build this family that we're talking about.
That's a good question. And when you first started to ask the question, my first thought was thinking about how technology is going to change and become more a part of business, and as I'm looking at our organization. And then at the last part of your question, you brought it back to the personal component.
Mhm.
So I think that's going to be an interesting balance of how do we come back together, yet recognize what's the new normal, and where is our comfort level. For our organization, we're certainly starting to look at the recovery phase, and we have different groups that are starting to look at different components and how to roll back out and open up in a safe way. So my hope is that there will be broad community involvement. I actually feel very fortunate to have come in January now, where I'm getting to meet the people that are here and developing relationships, and not having come into the exuberance of coming in the summer. So I feel like I've really been fortunate to start making real relationships. And in those relationships, recognizing some of the people who are in this town that just tend to look on it with a kind of motherly, fatherly attitude, and they're very. I keep coming back to the word ferocious. But as for an organization, town government, one of the things that we're looking at is the health and public health and safety, the science. How do we make decisions regarding database? How do we do it in a safe way for public safety, emergency management, transportation? Looking at the businesses, this is going to be a big deal. We've got businesses that are hurting. We've got workers who are out of work, wondering and worrying about what's going to happen to them. So there's a lot of uncertainty, and certainly it goes back again to what Dawn's talking about is, there's some vulnerabilities that this brings an opportunity for us to recognize within ourselves. And do we have a new normal and start to live our lives and some of our priorities differently? The social services, we're also working with social services to make sure that the population here are taken care of and no one does fall through the cracks. And that includes the food pantries and the churches and the support groups, and making sure that there's, when this started, we had a group of people who were counselors and therapists, and said, we'll do a hotline free, whoever just needs to talk for whatever purposes. And so the resources, people just stepped up and said, we will step into that void. We will make sure people are okay coming so that they can come back out of this. I talked already a little bit about the town government and how we've been working and operating. And we've got a couple of good support people that are going to help us as we start to kind of plan for the opening, so that we can reopen and start socializing again in a phased in way. And that's also what I'm hearing from the governor, that as the shelter and the stay at home advisory starts to change, that we're not going to just flip a switch and we're back to normal, that there'll be a phased piece over that. So I think we'll have opportunities to continue to figure out what's important to us and our priorities and how we move forward. My hope is that the caring and the love, which I'm kind of humbled by watching, still stays as one of the priorities that we continue to do. So I stop there.
Thanks, Robin. Peter, I told you I'd come back to you on hugs. Since I joined the theater family, it's all about hugs. I don't actually know how David Drake is surviving this pandemic, because it's not just a hug, but it lasts 2-3 minutes, and you finally have to say, "Let me go. I can't get my breath." So, Peter, maybe you can give us a little sense of what you think is going to happen when we get back to a new normal. And you started with the virtual hugs, and we go to real hugs. Where do you think we're going once we come back together?
Yeah, similar to what Robin mentioned, is just having in our vision just what this new normal may look like and how we're going to get there. Because this new normal is going to be transitioning over several months and over a year, and it may change other aspects of society for much longer than that. But just this whole experience is very deeply humbling, I think, for all of us. And it really just sets us at a much even level where we can recognize how valuable each individual is, and just be patient with one another and learn from one another, and a re-implementation plan as far as going back into the workforce and socializing. It's only going to be as successful as we are successful working with one another across agencies, across municipalities, and just being willing to forget any relationships that might have been negative in the past, to recreating new relationships where we can see both sides, and just being honest and comfortable with one another, and just also continuing to have the highest maintaining safety for both our employees and also our participants and clients, since it's our responsibility to make sure that everyone is going to be as safe as possible, and that we introduce our services, especially our testing services. In the summer, we normally do over 1,000 HIV tests in P-Town alone, and it's not going to look like that this summer, obviously, but we're going to go back to our goal of just like, how can we do the greatest good that we can with the individuals we have and the resources that we have, and just maintaining our kindness throughout the entire piece of it. It's just smiling when you can, listening when you can. If people are open to virtual hugs, providing virtual hugs. If they're not in the mood, giving people space. So.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Of course, one of the biggest huggers on this screen, Polly, can you talk a little bit about how you see it coming back once we get back and we're together again physically?
Well, I've been thinking while everyone else was talking, and I wish I had a good answer for you. And I think that that's part of the problem that we're all facing right now is nobody really knows, especially locally here in Provincetown, because the more you think about it and the further down the rabbit hole you want to go, the more you know that things are never going to be the way they were. But what I'm trying to do is I'm finding some hope amid all of the chaos and all, because what I'm even in this short conversation that we've had just now, I'm hearing a lot of creative ways of solving problems right now. People like everyone is talking about how their office or their agency is trying to find ways of providing their service safely and in a new way. And, adversity in a lot of ways really forces, innovation and creativity. And I think that if we can sort of fight the small battles one at a time as they come, eventually we'll have gotten through all the battles and the war will be won, and there will be on the other side. It's hard to know right now what the other side is going to look like.
Mm-hmm.
We sort of have to get through it. And then when we're, as like I said before, when we fought all those battles, we'll have a new reality. But it's hard now because none of us really has a clear vision of what that reality is going to look like. And I was kind of thinking today, it's in a way, there's been a couple times in my life, and probably in most people's lives, when you sort of find yourself, maybe you're in the wrong job, you're making good money, you've got benefits, but you sort of know that it's not really right for you. And I think anyone who's lived in this town has sort of felt those grumblings over the last decade or so, maybe forever. But people are always, whatever, everyone has their own complaints. Oh, it's too busy. There's too many tourists. It's, it's too expensive, whatever. There's 1,000,001 complaints that everyone has had. And so like when you're in a job that you're not happy with, what you have to do eventually is quit the job and get a new one. And that is really scary because you're giving up the security that you've got, the benefits you've got, that guaranteed paycheck. But to save your own sanity, you have to give that 2 weeks notice and sort of dive headlong into the unknown, make that leap of faith. And if you expand that analogy outwards, that's sort of what Provincetown is, in my opinion, going through right this moment. We're living through it. So we've known for a while that, I don't know, it's okay. We're making great money. Things on paper are getting better every year. But, a lot of the longtime residents they're always grumbling about, how busy things are and how hard it is to, live your life in the summer and how expensive it is to eat out. And it's good, but it's not good. Well, okay, now's our chance to quit that old job, go find a new job. As scared as we are, we got to do it. And you know what? 9 times out of 10, when you quit that old job and you get the new job, you're way happier for it in the end. It's almost always the right move.
So, Paul, you've actually sparked a question I was going to ask at the end, which is, we've all developed some, or at least experienced some new skills that we maybe didn't know we had. And you talked about the person you knew on the West Coast that learned how to go back and make something to help our hands because they were dried out. So I mean, it sounds like there's an opportunity for all of us to take some of these new skill sets and do something about it. So that's kind of the call to action that I was hoping we'd get to at the end of our call now. Anything that any of you would suggest as a call to action as we think about where we are, the people that we've worked with during this pandemic, and what we might do for a call to action. I know, Paul, you talked about certainly your GoFundMe, but examples of call to action. How do we get off our butts and do something after this pandemic is over? Thoughts, suggestions, ideas.
Well, my suggestion would be to everyone, it doesn't have to be anything big.
Yep.
It can be something really small, as long as it's something. You know, if you have a 5-year-old kid in the house, have them make one of those little signs that says, "Thank you, Mr. Mailman," and stick that in the window. Because I'll tell you, when I'm out walking dogs and I see those little signs in the windows and all, it really does affect you and it makes you feel better. So do whatever, take a little step, and it's better than
Doing
making
nothing.
no steps.
Yep.
I'll kind of merge that question a little bit with the vision for what after question, because for me, they're kind of conflated. And, you know, crisis, silver lining of crises, as we know, is that it disrupts business as usual. And for a lot of us, business as usual is being overly busy. So, you know, I like the sort of Buddhist saying, don't just do something, sit there. So I think, you know, part of my vision is an inward vision, you know, that on the other side of this, that we also take the opportunity to really, you know, again, contemplate this notion of uncertainty and impermanence. And perhaps it gives us an opportunity to learn and support each other to be more graceful in letting go when things do change, and to live a little bit easier within uncertainty, as difficult as that is, and to help each other develop an active relationship with mortality. Again, you don't have to become best friends, but like just start having a relationship. And then relatedly, you know, in terms of the more outwardly actions, you know, is to, you know, take this opportunity to challenge this story of independence and aloneness, and to really embrace the reality that the world exists through interdependence, and to really embrace that. And that's what we're doing here in the middle of the crisis. We're really calling on each other to support each other in a very interdependent way. And that's probably my number one hope for us after this, is that we live more fully in a world of interdependence versus independence, because we all love so deeply, and to just allow each other to support each other with that love.
Thanks, Dawn. Robin, any closing thoughts on next steps or call to action?
My first thought when you said that was, call your mother.
Yeah.
You know, it is about family. I think that we've experienced a different level of isolation and just trying to keep our distance. I think that as coming back for me, I'm going to be trying to see what that means internally and take the time to be introspective. I've had an opportunity to break some patterns, such as shopping and going about freely. So there's some places for me to find gratitude for things that I've taken for granted.
Mm-hmm.
And so I want to reach out. I want to pay attention to what I think might now be more important than some of those snippets that I've basically bought into and interrupt the patterns. So I think for me, the call to action is to take advantage and look for the pearls in this opportunity to slow down and to really see the people. Take a moment, take a breath, look in people's eyes, and just meet for a moment. because there's an opportunity to slow down in your life. And the one piece that I do want to also bring out is, I think there's a lesson to learn for us about the earth and how she's had an opportunity to clean herself while we've been quiet. And I want to pay attention to that, and what other nice things get done around me without my control, while I'm in abeyance to doing something else. So I'm really glad to see what's happening to the atmosphere and the animals in the forest. And, you know, again, there's always something that good that you can find coming
Right.
out of any situation.
Right. Thanks, Robin. Peter, we're back to the hugs again.
Yeah, so similar to what other people mentioned, we've all been forced to isolate. We've been understimulated in many ways that we're not used to, and a lot of times we're not comfortable with. And something it's very difficult, but it can be a helpful exercise. It's just taking what you're learning, what you're hearing, what you're experiencing during this time, and just taking the time to really just internalize it and sit with it, and not need to share it or explode it back onto social media immediately. Just allow yourself to just feel that uncomfort or that comfort, whatever you're experiencing, and think about what you could do after the fact. Should you write your municipality a letter about a suggestion? Should you write your local agency about, we could possibly be doing this, or these needs could be met in this way in the future, and just sharing some sort of positive feedback for how you think the angle that you share could benefit a greater good. And I think it really takes that time to sit with something and just let it just be there for a minute or more, and share and try to be positive about it in the most humble way possible. So, because I do know, coming from the AIDS support group, we want to hear from people. We want to know what we can do. What people are we missing? Who else can benefit from our services, and how can we do it together? And so, hearing thoughtful feedback it's super real, and it's super helpful, and it's only going to allow us to be stronger and more effective.
Sounds like we probably should be doing some reaching out to get some feedback from all of our clients and all of our town residents and everyone we've talked to and spoken to, so that we have a sense of what should we be doing. We're beginning to think about what we think we should be doing, but maybe we should be listening to what might come in. I don't know what the survey instrument might be, but that's a thought, obviously, Robin, for you, as to how we can get thoughts from our residents. Same thing for you, Don, from Talk. And all of us need to think about, I guess, ways to gather this information.
And I'm going to jump in with, because you plugged it, the coalition is putting together a couple of surveys for business needs as well as community-wide. And so I just put a plug out there to watch for that and give us your feedback. Maybe even consider, instead of rushing and seeing it as if it's something just has to get done, that maybe you take some time and really put your heart and soul in telling us what you want, because we will tabulate all of that and try to bring your views into as we plan to come out of this. Thanks.
Any other comments about survey work or how we get feedback? I know we all have different ways. So, Polly, I think at this point, were you supposed to sing? Yeah.
Only if you really want everyone to, close their laptops and go home.
Well, I think we want to begin thanking the audience that either called in or went onto our platform to watch our conversation. Certainly, we appreciate the audience that has supported us. Robin, we want to thank you. Don, we want to thank you. Peter, Paul. We appreciate the support that the theater has had during this virtual programming. We're encouraging everyone to participate in virtual programming, so certainly go to provincetowntheater.org. That's an opportunity for you to hear what's coming up ahead of us. And I would encourage each of you to also publicize what your organizations are doing to encourage people to stay connected. And hopefully it won't be very, very long, and we will be able to have those real hugs. Thank you again. Have a good day. Stay safe and stay well.
Thank you.
Very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye, everyone.